In this video, I'll show you how to use Codux to visually edit component styles, including how to create classes, edit classes, use states, variables, inheritance, and computed styles. So in Codux, we're going to take a look at this video card component that I've already created. And by the way, you can even clone this repo and import this project into Codux yourself. There is a link in the description below to the GitHub repo. And as you can see here, this component has two boards. Boards are rendering environments for your components. They allow us to see components rendered in different variations, such as cards with various content like we see here, desktop and mobile views, or different states that a component may have. And this will become more clear as we dig in. So let's open this first board. So if we wanted to actually edit the component, we would go over to the component here and click the edit icon. Now we're editing the actual component, and anything that we change here will affect this component globally within the app. So any board where this component is used will be changed. And that's really cool because you don't have to go around changing things everywhere, and you'll see the results at the end of this video. So now that we're in this component, let's say we want to add a button for some reason. So let's go ahead and add a button. And then let's edit the styles for this button. So if we go over to the styles panel, under selectors, we can create or add a class. So let's go ahead and add a class. Now, if we already had a global button class, then you could just apply that to this button here. But for demonstration purposes, let's go ahead and create a new class from scratch. So we'll go to create class, and we'll call this the button class. And we can select what file we want this to be included in. So we're using CSS modules. So let's just go ahead and include that in the video preview module, and we'll create that class. So now we have our new class, and we can see that here under selectors, we can see the .button class. And we can see below this all of the editable CSS properties. Now, every single CSS property is listed out here, so there are ways to make this easier to navigate. We start out with our layout, and each of these categories we can collapse. We have our self layout, positioning, spacing, which includes margin and padding, our size, our text properties, borders and corners, background colors, and effects such as shadows, opacity, and cursor settings. But the feature that I really like is this search box right here. We can just search for the property that we want to edit, and it will take you directly to it. So let's search for border radius. And I just started typing BORD, and it immediately took me to the borders and corners properties. So let's add some slight rounding to these corners. So let's add, I don't know, maybe 8 pixels of rounding. And so now we have rounded corners on our button. So let's take a look at the actual style sheet now and see what was created for us. So if we go up to our button class selector that we created, first of all, we can see a summary of the properties that are set on this selector. So we can see the border radius that we just added. Now let's click the 3 dots to see more options. Soon there's going to be an option here to open the code directly in VS Code. But for now, we have the other option, which is to open the code here inside Codux. So let's click that. And that takes us directly to this class that it created, along with that border radius property that we added. And this is in our video preview module.scss file. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you is how to use variables within Codux. So in my video card styles sheet at the top here, I've included a couple of variables, a button primary color and a button secondary color. And so now we can use these variables to change the background color of our button. And we can also have variables in multiple style sheets if we want. And depending on their location and inheritance, they'll all be available to us. So let's go over to our search and let's type in background. And so now we have our background options. Let's customize our fill color. And now we can see that button primary and button secondary variable. Let's choose primary. And now we have a blue button. And since these variables can be used for many different property types, such as colors, sizes, and so on, Codux will actually filter them and only show the variables that apply to the property that you're trying to edit. So that's really cool too. Now, what if we want to change our button's background color on hover? That would involve changing the state of our button. So if we look here under states, we can select our state and let's select the hover state. This will lock our button into the hover state. So now we can create this .button:hover selector in our style sheet. Let's go ahead and do that. So now we have that selected. Now any properties that we edit will apply to the hover state. So let's change the background color, and we'll use that secondary color for our hover state. Let's take a look at our style sheet again and see what was changed. So if we go down to the bottom here, we now see within our button class, we have our background color set to primary. And then on hover, we have our background color set to secondary. So all of that was done for us. Really cool. Also, notice that there is a state lock indicator, both in our elements panel here and on the card here where we see these dots. This is just another reminder that we've set a state. So let's go ahead and reset our state. So if we go back over here and we can reset our states so that the hover state is not locked in. And now let's preview our component. So far, we've been in select mode, but we can switch to a preview mode, and this will simulate interactions with our component. So right here, we can see we're currently in the select mode. Let's change to preview mode. And now when we hover over the button, we should see that background change. Pretty cool. Now, many times you'll have components that have more than one class applied to them. And so it's important to understand which classes we should be editing. So here we have our div.root selected, and we have a root class on it. We also see this div selector, and it's in red. It's colored red, and it has this note. It says may also affect other elements. So this is considered a global selector. If I were to edit any global classes or selectors, then these changes would apply globally, and they may have unintended consequences. So we can easily see with this color coding which selectors are safe and which ones are unsafe to edit. And another cool thing is when we hover over these, we get a quick preview of what's going on with this class. What properties is it changing? So if I wanted to edit the layout of this root selector, I would select that class, and then I could go ahead and change. Let's say we want to change the flex direction. Let's reverse it. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but we could do that here. But if I did that same thing with the div selected instead, then every div in our application could have a reversed flex direction. And that's definitely not what we intended. Now, another thing to consider is inheritance. So CSS inheritance works as expected in Codux. For instance, if we change the font color, let's go to font color. It's currently set to white. So let's just change this to yellow. And now our font is changed only in some places. I wonder why that is. Well, we have changed it here in our root selector. If we come down here to our title, we can see that it is inheriting yellow from the root by clicking on the color, which is highlighted purple. But if we go to the channel text, we can see that it's specifically set in the info-channel class. So this class is overriding the parent class, which is exactly how CSS inheritance works. So let's go back to our root and let's change this back to white. Now, if you've ever used the DevTools in your browser, you're probably familiar with computed styles. So far, we've been here in our styles panel. Let's move up to the computed styles panel. So this is a nice way to quickly see a summary of all the styles that are being applied to an element. And this is easier than going to the styles panel and parsing through the entire list of properties that may or may not be modified. This also comes in very handy when you have multiple classes on a single element and you're not sure which to edit to change a specific property. So this element here has two classes, and when I click on any edit icon, I know that I'm going to be brought to the correct selector to change this property. So let's go back to our boards again. Now that we've edited this component, we can see here the changes to both of these boards. Initially, we went into this first board and we edited the component. But remember, we said that when we change a component, it updates that component in every board. So we can see that button and all of the styles that we applied to that button here in our second board as well. So again, components can be rendered differently in multiple boards, but edits to the components themselves are global. So now you know how to create classes, edit classes, use states, variables, inheritance, and computed styles in Codux. If you haven't given Codux a try yet, download it today. It's currently in beta and is completely free. There's a link in the description below. Also, if this video was helpful, give it a like and subscribe for more Codux tutorials, tips, and tricks.